Well, good afternoon. Since day one of this session, House Dems have stressed the urgent need to address the affordability crisis, leaving an ever-growing number of Missourians still struggling to pay for the basics. Unfortunately, Missouri Republicans set the agenda around here, and this week they chose to prioritize their obsession about where people pee over cutting costs for working families. Not only that, Republicans seem to be running full speed ahead in the opposite direction. The Commerce Committee voted out H.J. 174 this week, which is the governor's plan to raise sales taxes on all goods and services. And this new and substantially higher tax rate and base, it's going to make things more expensive for everything Missourians buy. And it's absolutely going to make life less affordable for Missourians. Not to mention the double whammy on small businesses that will see their own costs soar due to high taxes. They're going to lose customers who will have less dollars to spend. We expect it to be debated on the floor next week, as the Speaker has indicated he wants to send his bill to the Senate before our legislative spring break. And while that's the governor's top priority, and probably does get out of the House, there's no guarantee it gets on the ballot, since no one but the governor and his allies seem to be clamoring for higher taxes and higher prices. And if it does get on the ballot, it'll add to the growing list of partisan Republican ballot measures that Missourians will reject this year. I'm happy to take questions.
I have a question for Representative Fogel. You guys sent the supplemental budget to the governor's desk this afternoon, and one of the things that was absent from when it went over to the Senate and it came back was the money for the Missouri State Capitol Commission.
Correct.
On the Senate, they said that, they implied that it was unnecessary to, spend the money and that, it's irresponsible to put it in there. That money doesn't come from general revenue. It's already in a pot by itself. So what are your thoughts on, is there any thoughts for them to use that money?
Yeah, we'll have to see if the intention is to remove the $14 million that was struck out in the supplemental, with their argument being that the supplemental should really be used for emergency funding. I think their argument is that the Capitol Commission project wouldn't meet the definition of emergent. I think it is important to remember that the money set aside in the Capitol Commission are dollars that could be used as general revenue. They could very easily be moved back into the general revenue bucket. They're general revenue lookalike dollars. If the Senate and the House choose to not proceed with the Capitol Commission project at large, that's a different conversation. But I was supportive of not including that in the emergency spending supplemental that we passed out today.
Thank you.
Yep.
Can I, while you're
Yeah,
up there,
well, I'm here.
Can you just update us on budget as far as any highlights that you want to mention for the next budget, and what's the goal at this point as far as getting it to the House floor? I'm trying to remember if it's before spring break.
Yeah, great questions. The chair this morning shared that we would expect to get our eyes on the chairman's sub tomorrow, sometime on Friday, with a goal of marking it up in Budget Committee next week, probably Wednesday or Thursday. We would then go to legislative spring break, of course, the week after that, and do it on the floor when we come back from legislative spring break. So I would anticipate the substitute being available to everybody tomorrow, with amendment deadlines of sometime on Monday or Tuesday, marking up in committee either Wednesday or Thursday.
Was that the original goal, was to start debating after spring?
I believe the original goal was to pass it out of the chamber before we hit spring break, but it's hard, it's a big project and we want to get it right. And so I'm totally comfortable postponing that to getting back from spring break. In terms of high level, I will say one thing that has been made public is the budget chairman's recommendation to change how we fund higher education. The rest of the chairman's sub, I don't have lines or eyes on yet, but yesterday he shared with both our 4 years and our 2 years that there were going to be significant changes to how we fund our community colleges and our public universities, which was met with a lot of passionate responses from our community colleges and from our colleges.
What do those significant changes look like? Is that based upon that funding formula that's being?
It is not. It's a different model. It factors in full-time enrollment of our colleges and community colleges. There is a flat number that gets appropriated out to our community colleges in our 4 years, and it's just a flat number. It's $8,000 and something for our 4 years, $3,000 and something for our 2 years. There are some significant winners and losers in those recommendations, and I just got this information yesterday afternoon, so our caucus is still kind of digging into it ourselves. But notably, Truman University takes a really big cut. St. Louis Community College takes a really big cut. So we are anxiously awaiting that debate next week.
What do you think of the 2-year versus 4-year, 3,000 versus 4,000? Do you think, was the enrollment of 2 years talked about versus 4-year, like, you know, I don't know if because college is so expensive, you know, if the rise of attendance at 2-year is, you know, I guess, does it match up with the $3,000?
Yeah, so notably, this proposal uses the exact same amount of dollars that we were going to spend in the governor's recommendations. It just changes how we fund it. So our 2-year institutions are getting the exact same dollar amount that they are getting in the governor's recommendations. It's just some are getting more and some are getting less. Same with our 4 years. So it doesn't change in total how much we're spending on higher education. It just changes how we allocate that. Again, there are some universities that I would imagine are going to like this proposal, and some that have, you know, I was pulled, as soon as this information became public, about 30 seconds later, I was starting to get pulled. I know my other budget members were starting to get pulled with universities and community colleges who have considerable concerns with their budgets being reduced in a fiscal year that starts in a few months. Yeah, any other budget questions before I head over?
Representative Steinhoff alluded today to more cuts coming to education in the proposed budget next week. Is there anything more we can share about that?
Yeah, again, the chairman's recommendations will become public tomorrow, so I can't speak to what we would see. I know the subcommittee chairmen have been very public about their desire to cut significant amounts from the governor's recommendations. Notably, Representative Chappell had shared publicly in our subcommittee hearing that he wanted to cut an additional $500 million. I believe Subcommittee Chairman Davidson has said some similar things publicly. Our caucus has not been read in or has not been provided information about what those cuts might look like, and we look forward to seeing those numbers tomorrow.
Representative Fuchs, if I may, you voted no on the property tax bill. Could you share why?
My colleagues worked very hard on this bill, and yet at the end of the day, I do not feel that it was what was best for Missourians. I am a little leery about changing the property taxes, and I respect the committee as they worked all summer and into this the fall and into this session. And I listened to some of my colleagues who were on that committee who, while they were in favor of the bill, they didn't actually maybe fully support it, but they wanted to be supportive of the committee that they were serving on. And because I think I have a position in this caucus that I can maybe be more of an outlier sometimes and hold my line for what I believe is good, better for Missouri families. And so that was why I took the no vote on that. Thank you.
Representative Steinhoff, sorry, did you have
No,
more?
go ahead. Oh,
Did you
you're
have a
going
follow-up
to
there?
Representative Fuchs, can I ask and just follow up with that? So what do you think of Representative Taylor's remarks? I think he said today that it's not going to take away from any money from districts.
You know, one of the things that we do a lot in this chamber is disagree on party lines. And so I respect the chairman and his opinion, and yet I listen to some of my colleagues about how they do think it's going to impact Missourians.
For Representative Steinhoff, I know you ultimately voted yes, but you still had a lot of reservations, especially with the way that it would impact schools. Can you go into your reservations, but also why you decided to vote yes on that?
Yes, so my reservations were around the minimum tax levy that's been in place since the 90s in order to be kind of like a social contract into getting the foundation formula, and maybe even stronger than a social contract. It was a decision that was made early on in trying to get people to adopt the foundation formula because, as you know, in Missouri, schools are primarily supposed to be funded locally. And I would say that probably a lot of the school districts represented by the people behind me, they're paying a lot for their schools with local money. And because the state's not chipping in on a lot of their school districts, that money that they pay towards the state is going to some smaller school districts that are at that minimum levy, which is $275. And so by lowering that levy, it's worrisome to me. It's worrisome to me for lots of reasons. It's worrisome to me because will we potentially be having to supplement those smaller school districts even more if this reduction is taking place? We've got the Foundation Formula Task Force working right now. if the work that they have been doing for over a year now hinges on that minimum levy, and then we're over here just flipping a number around, that could have disastrous effects. And then, of course, I'm also worried about those districts that are at 275, because basically what this bill, the design here, is to force them to roll back. And I don't know those school districts. I don't have a 275 school district. And a lot of people keep saying to me, why do you care about them? You don't even have a district like that. And that's because I care about Missouri children. And I want to make sure that we want to have the most equitable education system that we can in this state while still supporting a local funding model. So those were my concerns about the 275. But to your question about why did I ultimately vote yes, is I went around to try to find the experts that are still in this building around the foundation formula. I got a lot of interesting responses. All of them had the same hesitation as I did, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we're going to touch that. And then they'd look at the language and they'd think about it. And I couldn't find somebody who would really tell me that it would have some negative effects. So I thought of all the work that we did in our committee, and I thought of all the good work that we did, and I would hate to hold back my yes vote on the support of that if, in fact, I had no evidence of something that was going to be nefarious as far as that tax levy reduction would be. I know it is not the intent of the chair or any of the people that supported that on that committee. It's not their intent at all to take money away from schools. I'm just worried that it might.
For my St. Louis reps, the bill to restore voting rights to people who are on parole or probation got passed through. Most of, or a lot of the state's population of people on parole or probation are in St. Louis City or County. So do you all have reactions to how this might impact your constituents specifically?
I think this will definitely impact our constituents. It's a great bill. It's a great bill given the fact that there are over 50,000 people who are currently on probation and parole. This will give them the opportunity to exercise their constitutional right that has been infringed on.
Anything else?
I have a follow-up on that. Last night there was a hearing in the, let me think if I can remember, the Special Committee on Intergovernmental Affairs. Oh, yeah. Yes. And there was a bill that was put through that would give municipal courts the ability to enforce warrants for like traffic violations on people that don't show up to court. Have you been following any of that? I know there were some folks that were from some of the larger cities, not Jefferson City, but some of the larger cities that had some reservations about that. I didn't know if you had any thoughts about that. Oh, yeah. So I didn't see you back there.
So, being that I represent a sliver of Ferguson and Calverton Park, we know that the Department of Justice did the work that it did because our community was over-policed. So much so that you had elderly, senior citizens facing tremendous fines. So that bill, though, so when the Department of Justice came, it swung the pendulum to the point where if you get a ticket or if you get in a violation, there's nothing to encourage you to come and face those violations. The struggle that we have is we never want to go back to that over-policing, but we can't live in this Wild Wild West GTA. So I feel like that bill strikes a balance where there is accountability and people can still or will still be called to the carpet about violations. And it does have that carve out for minor violations so that there's not this overwhelming burden on the people of these municipalities.
So for you, you would say that it does strike that balance?
I'm leaning towards it. I've got another couple days to think it through. And so, but right now I know something needs to be done. I myself was in a situation where I was rear-ended and the person drove off. So we've got to do something about people who are committing traffic violations so that they own up to that. We just don't want it to be so heavily burdened that people cannot exist and that your citizens feel as if they're being, I don't want to say terrorized, but definitely tracked and targeted.
I had one more question about the property taxes, and this is. I spoke with a couple senators this afternoon, or rather it was this morning, and they said that essentially whatever the House does is going to be the main vehicle for property tax reform. Do you think that what you guys just passed is the best vehicle to go forward?
I'm going to let Taylor
Yeah.
take that.
As we all know, property taxes are extremely complex. In fact, and there are so many components of it, agricultural, commercial, personal property, and then real estate property. I say that the House did a very thorough job with our road shows and the number of hearings that we had this past summer, literally going to the corners of Missouri and talking to people, literal homeowners, hearing from the library districts, hearing from the fire districts, hearing from the ambulatory districts, hearing from the community colleges. So the amount of research that we did and the hours of hearings that we went through, I think does speak testimony to the amount of commitment that we've done here on the House side. With that, we've seen a number of different proposals coming forward. And what we passed from Chairman Tim Taylor, I think boils it down to a few small elements that we tend to agree are going to have a very strong impact. Probably the strongest of those is just how we apply the Hancock Amendment itself. St. Louis County actually looks at that within those silos that I talked about earlier: commercial, real estate, personal property, and agriculture. And what it says is that spikes in one are not going to be averaged out by lulls or neutrality in the others. That spikes in one are actually going to be isolated and identified, and those individuals within that group will actually see some relief. So we're pretty, Democrats and Republicans both agree that that was an excellent proposal that came forward, that we're moving, that we've been championing that. And I think for that reason, I think that I would say the Senate is probably best to follow our lead on this, the years of experience that we've done, the testimony that we've gone through, and the hour of debate that we put through to it.
If I could just add to that, I think it's important to note that the bill that was passed today, I believe the only reason it passed out of the House is because we had a whole lot to say after the first perfection vote in this chamber about how quickly it was moving and how little debate we were able to have on such an enormous and impactful bill. So I'm very grateful not only to the folks on the committee who are on our side of the aisle for really digging in and doing that work, going back into that committee room and hammering this out to make it the very best version of the bill possible. That's what happens when democracy is actually given a little bit of time to do the work, and I'm grateful that we got it to a place where there was large support. Anything else? All right, y'all have a great weekend.